Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel, FPL Vincenzo, and finally the game week 1 deadline for FPL is here. Recording this one day before the deadline, but I think I've pretty much locked my team in, so I think it's a good enough time to share my draft, my final draft. I've tried quite hard in the last couple of weeks not to say too much around where my team's heading, what directions I'm looking. I have kind of changed plans a little bit 2 or 3 times in the last month or so. Some things have been fairly rigid, but I've had some movements, some thoughts based on what I've seen in pre-season. Obviously, what I've taken in from other content creators and analysis I've seen online, etc., around expectations. And this is all part of the game, right? You forge your own thoughts. You look at the data. You look at what other people think. Some of that will resonate with you. Hopefully, some of the things I say on here will resonate with you. And then, from all the information you have, you then make your final decision. So that's where we've got to here. So we'll look at the players first, position by position, and then we'll move on. So I'll start off with the 2 goalkeepers that are currently in my draft. I said a day before we finally lock in. And for those on audio, I've got Hermanson at West Ham at 4.5 and Dubravka at Burnley at 4 million. I have wavered a little bit with paying 5 million for a keeper, particularly Robert Sanchez. Because I don't have a Chelsea defender. Their fixtures are quite good, particularly of the better teams. Their fixtures are quite good. And I don't hate Sanchez as a pick, but generally in FPL, I think there's usually a 4.5 keeper that does quite well. And particularly in terms of that balance, what I look for between save points and clean sheets. I think in an ideal world, even someone like Mark Flecken last year got a lot of save points. I think Brentford probably under-delivered in terms of clean sheets. If that was a couple higher, in line with expectation, he would have been one of the best performing goalkeepers. So I'm fairly confident here we'll find a 4.5 keeper that can keep around 10 clean sheets over the season. If they get a healthy amount of save points to go with that, I think that'll be fine. And I don't think you'll gain much from paying 5 million or 5.5. There probably are some gains, but not much. So the 4.5 keepers, which ones do I want? I've wavered really on 3 of them. Kelleher at Brentford, but he did have quite a high ownership. And I'm just not sure how it's going to work at Brentford. Obviously, they've got a new manager. Thomas Frank's gone to Tottenham. We've got no real evidence and insight on how they'll play. Will it just be a continuation of what Frank put in place at Brentford, or will he have his own ideas? Keith Andrews, we don't know. And it's quite a big shift also for Kelleher, who's obviously at Liverpool before, where there was, I would argue, more of an onus on distribution rather than shot stopping. So Liverpool would have wanted a certain profile of keeper that have a certain set of attributes. I don't think Brentford necessarily play the same way, or haven't done up until now. So is this signing something from Andrews to say they're going to transfer to a new style? Basically, the ultimate answer is to Kelleher, I don't know. And often in times when I don't know or I'm unsure, I'd rather take a watching brief with that player and see later. It's very possible that by the time I play my first wild card, he might be the best 4.5 keeper, Kelleher, in which case I'll put him in then. But to start with, it's just too much unknown about how Brentford will play, how much he'll fit into their system. And in all reality, I'd like to see some evidence on what he's like as a shot stopper. Because at Liverpool before, he's been very much as a distribution first, shot stopping second, the same as we see from like Edison, Raya, players like that. They're in the team more for what they do with their feet, I would say, more than what they do with their hands. So completely different environment now for Kelleher. How will he perform? Could be very good, might not be, but I'm not going to risk it. Then we've got Petrovic at Bournemouth, who's the other one. And I'm more so, I don't want to make generalizations because he's a big guy, but I think he's got the potential to be quite a good shot stopper. Issue obviously being with Bournemouth is their defence is in a bit of a mess. Zabani, I think, is now gone to PSG, or an offer's been accepted. Huijsen's gone. I've got no idea how long it will take them to get into a settled back four. Treffaire's new. There's another new centre-back that's arrived. They've got Senesi and James Hill still there. But one of the things I find about Areola as a manager of Bournemouth, I think he's got quite a clear identity on how he wants to play. And from what I've seen, it's not always the easiest to sort of pick that up quickly. So I think they've been very shrewd in the past, Bournemouth, with the sort of transfers they made. I'm sure they've done good analysis on the player profiles they're signing. But are they guaranteed to hit the ground running? Will it take them some time? Again, Petrovic new to the club. Again, it's all just a bit of an unknown how good these new defenders are, how quickly they'll adapt. And it's Liverpool in game week 1 as well at Anfield. So not the ideal game where things could go wrong. We've already seen Liverpool beat Bournemouth 9-0. I'm not saying we'll get a repeat of that, but there's evidence. So again, Petrovic, I've probably got more hope on him becoming a better asset long-term than Kelleher. And if I was going to be pushed to have one of them two now, it would be Petrovic. I'd risk him. But I've got reservations about both of them. So then we come on to Hermansen, who we know is quite a good shot stopper from his time at Leicester. And importantly, I think West Ham's data from last season, you look at in 2 batches, obviously before Graham Potter and after Graham Potter. And their XGC in the period after Potter joined was much better. They jumped to 10th from 17th previously. And in pre-season, I think defensively they've been fairly good. There seems to be a trend towards maybe them playing a back 3, which I quite like, whether that will be Tadibo, Kilman and somebody else. Maybe Agard or someone like that. Wan-Bissaka could potentially play in a back 3 rather than a wing back. But for teams that I think generally give up a little bit of a quality edge in a lot of games, which I think West Ham are one of those teams, I think back 3s are better for keeping the game balanced, for keeping the game competitive. You don't tend to get outnumbered in the wrong parts of the pitch, etc. So if West Ham are going to stick to this back 3, I think defensively they'll improve. They were a mid-table team last year in Potter's time for data in terms of defensively. I think this move to a back 3 will probably make them stronger. And they've signed the goalkeeper with a track record for being quite a good shot stopper. So the stars have aligned a little bit here with him. Issue being is he hasn't played for West Ham in pre-season. I think everything's fine for him to be in the squad for game week 1 away to Sunderland, but there's no guarantees he'll go straight into the first team. The other goalkeepers, Areola in particular, is still there. So it's a bit risky. I've got Dubravka there is also a risk. So possibilities here, a very small possibility. I might not even have a goalkeeper for game week 1 if I submit my game week 1 team with both of these two in it. But you have to go with gut feeling, I think, sometimes here. And my gut feeling is I think Hermansen's probably in the best position to be the best 4.5 keeper to start with. So I'm going to take the chance. I think that he's going to play game week 1. And then Dubravka just there as playing 4 million backup. I don't think I really need to spend more than sort of 8.5 on 2 keepers. Then we move on to defenders. And I've been fluctuating a lot here, particularly around these Defcon guys. For those that are new here, I've played Sky Fantasy Football a lot in the past. And one of the good elements I thought of Sky Fantasy Football that FPL hasn't had in my time is an element of predictability in terms of some points. Certain players in Sky were very reliable for getting points for certain things they did. So in the point scoring system in Sky, you got points for completing a certain number of passes, a certain number of tackles. You know, certain teams kept the ball a lot, had 60, 70% possession. Defenders knocked it amongst themselves quite a lot. So someone like Lewis Dunk, for an example, in the Sky game was very good because he always surpassed the passing threshold, guaranteed 2 points every game. So in FPL, historically, we've never had anything guaranteed. All of the points have been sort of with variance, shall we say. And certainly certain attacking players in certain teams have more chances of goals than others. But again, it's still not guaranteed. I've captained Harry Kane multiple times in the past at home to the worst teams in the league, and he's left with 2 points. We've had Mo Salah when Liverpool scored 9 goals and he got nothing. So these things can't be guaranteed. With this Defcon points, these CBIT points, whatever you want to call them, there's an element of predictability here. We know, unless there's a big injury or some drastic change, I think James Tarkowski is going to probably get about 150 points. I think Milenkovic and Murillo at Nottingham Forest are going to get 150 points. The only caveat is you have to play them every game, good and bad, home and away, etc., etc. But if I'm trying to win FPL here, and I think to win FPL this year, you're probably going to need about 3,000 points. It was about 2,800 last year. There's more chips in play, etc., etc. I think if you get 3,000, you're going to be right there as a candidate to win. If you're offering me now 2 defenders here for 5.5, I just leave them there, set and forget, play them every week. For 11 million outlay here, I think I can pretty much guarantee myself 300 points over this season. You ain't getting that 300 points from an 11 million player anywhere else. So fair enough, there might be 5.5 million defenders. There might be 6 million defenders with higher ceilings than these guys. But I'm quite keen on the thought right now of just having a handful of players that are just there. They tick along. You roughly know what you're going to get from them. They're not going to set the world alight, but equally not going to massively disappoint either. And you take your risk, you take your punt, you chase upside, etc. in the other spots. So it's a new feature to the game. Obviously, these Defcon CBIT points, whatever you call them. But I'm viewing it as a positive because I think it's a rare predictability. You kind of know where you stand with Everton, with Forest in particular, in terms of how many Defcon points you're likely to get. And they're quite repetitive. They'll happen quite often. So I'm going to just own, but I made the decision here. I'm going to start with both of them. I'm not a massive fan of Everton defence. Branthwaite's now done his hamstring, which won't help. But if Tarkowski is going to keep ticking along with appearances, 2 Defcon points because he makes a lot of clearances, spoken about that in a previous video, the importance of that, and somewhat regular clean sheets, that's fine. Same for Milenkovic. Both of them have some set piece threat, both fairly good in the air. I say I'm happy to let them 2 tick along. I'll play them every week. And hopefully at the end of the season, they've both collected their 150 points and I've done well from those solid picks. The third defender that I kind of want to view as a permanent one as well, I think I want to take a little bit more risk and balance it and have a bit more attacking capability. I've got no faith right now in really any of the 6 million guys. I've said before, I think Liverpool defensively are a bit of a mess right now. Do I really want to risk Frimpong? 8 Nori, how many minutes is he going to get? There's a lot of other players that can play left back. The Arsenal centre-backs don't have loads of upside. Cucurella is in a Chelsea team that have just lost Levi Colwell. What does that mean for their ball progression? How high will Cucurella be able to get if he has to play a bit deeper to help with his ball progression? A big unknown there. So the one thing I do quite know at the minute is that Pedro Porro is going to have quite a few routes to points here. He's not the worst of the attacking defenders for Defcon contributions. And with Maddison out and others not playing, he's taking a share of set pieces. Tottenham have been much improved under Thomas Frank structurally, particularly defensively. They obviously did okay last night against PSG for a big chunk of that game. Frank played a back 3 in that. I don't expect that to stick, but I think it will happen in some games. But Porro's role, I think, will be reasonably attacking. And we kind of know he's on the set pieces. And they've got Bournemouth at home in game week 1. I'm happy to start with him as my third defender with the intention of playing him every week. But I'm also more inclined to use this spot as a transfer. If Daniel Munoz becomes really attacking, really involved, I'll make that sideways move. If one of these 6 million defenders does start to stand out and become a regular source of points, I'll find the 0.5 from somewhere to move Porro on. So where Tarkowski and Milenkovic are more static positions, this 5.5 one is a flexible one. And so I think Pedro, based on taking set pieces and the fact he has Burnley in game week 1, I'm happy enough to pick him. Joachim Andersen's also there as the 4.5 defender, because I think of those at that price point, his Defcon ceiling is among the highest. And if I'm going to use this player 5-6 times a year, I'm going to have to be very lucky with any defender if that coincides with any of their attacking returns. So if I have to play Andersen 5 or 6 times and hopefully gets Defcon 3 or 4 times, that'll be more than enough as a stand-in sort of third defender. Also, Andersen rotates quite nicely with Porro. I think in the first 10 game weeks, I want to play Porro a lot. But in the 2 or 3 games where I'd be a bit more on edge about whether I want to pick him, Joachim Andersen's got a home game, including game week 2. He's at home to Man United. I don't mind that as a possible for a clean sheet in a Defcon contribution when Porro's got Man City away. So Andersen is a slight rotation option alongside Porro. And then a 4 million defender at the end. I don't know a lot about this Bajol guy at Leeds, but expectation is he's a 6'3" centre-back he might do very well for Defcon. Maybe he'll have some goal threat. I've got a bit more trust in Leeds than Burnley, for example, where Esteve is an option. So we'll see how that goes. I don't need him in game week 1 where he's not available, but that's fine. So the only sort of players I've looked at here that I don't own is the Crystal Palace guys. There's 3 of them at different price points. So Gahey at 4.5, Lecroix at 5, Munoz at 5.5. I'm open-minded to own any of them. I've had drafts where Tarkowski's been Lecroix, so I can invest the 0.5 somewhere else. I've had drafts where Porro's Munoz. I've also had drafts where Gahey's in there as well. And Gahey's a bit tricky. Obviously, he might move. How nailed will he be once he moves? Do I really want to be playing that game at the start that he goes to Liverpool, for example, in the deadline, but he's not immediately in the first team? My 4th defender at 4.5 here is someone I'm hoping will play 38 games. Gahey, by the time I wildcard again, may have cemented his place in a Liverpool team, and I'll gratefully have him at that point. But for now, I don't need to be playing those games and taking those chances. And I say at the start, Palace have now been put into qualifiers for Europe as well. So I think in the first 3 game weeks, they've got 5 fixtures. So a little bit of a fixture overload, probably not the world's biggest concern. The fixture I want them for is game week 4 at home to Sunderland. I'm likely to free hit that week. So I'll get my Palace coverage in the week I need them with the free hit. And at the start, just because of the fixture congestion, do I really want to begin playing those battles? Is it safer to go with what I've got here? I feel like it is right now. So this is what I'm playing. I say it'll be pretty much Tarkowski, Milenkovic and Porro every week. If Porro's got a bad game, Anderson subs in quite nicely. And Porro's spot is flexible in case a 6 million defender or a different 5.5 becomes sort of a necessity. That's an open spot to move on. Jump on to midfielders next. And at the moment, I've got Cole Palmer, Bruno Fernandes, Ismaila Sarr, Elliot Anderson, and Dewsbury Hall. So Cole Palmer, I don't think needs much introduction. I was quite pleased in the fixture with AC Milan. Again, it's a one-off friendly, so we won't read too much into it. But he had a more central role. They've tried him in a few different positions over the Club World Cup, for example. He was stationed on the right of a front 3. And I think towards the back end of last year, sometimes his output was thwarted a little bit by Enzo Fernandez, who often ran on quite a lot from the 8 spot in the left channel and played a little bit more as they almost played with 2 10s where Enzo was so high. I don't know if it's a result of the Colwell injury and a lack of ball progression without him. They played Chalobah as the left centre-back in the Milan game. But there was a big onus on Reece James sort of leading the ball progression from the defensive line. Enzo actually played more on the right side in that game rather than the typical left side we've seen him, and a bit deeper. Ball progression down that right between James, Enzo, Caicedo was over helping out, was where in that particular game the progression came from. If Enzo stays that deep, I think that's better for Cole Palmer. They're not getting in each other's way. Obviously, they've got different attackers now that he can link with, and Neto and maybe Gittins or Estevio, whoever it's going to be playing quite wide. So I think Palmer has a more central role here to start the season and a more floaty type role where he'll be able to go and get involved over on the right if that's where progression's coming from. If there's a bit more space to the left, he can hang out over there. So I'm happy with Palmer with the fixtures. And Chelsea's fixtures are very good, but all the other attackers, including João Pedro, again, just minutes risk. So much rotation possibility. Palmer's the one I feel most secure about getting minutes. Again, at the start, how many punts do I want to take? I think João Pedro's a valid punt. I think he probably is just about first choice ahead of the lap. But is he going to get a pre-60-minute sub? I think in most games he's going to get subbed off somewhere. And particularly in that AC Milan game, his position was quite deep. I think if you look at the heat map for that game, his average position was on the same horizontal line as Cucurella. Is that really where you want your striker being? He's expected to get you the most points and score goals. I'm not saying he won't do well, but there's enough concern with me with João Pedro. I don't want him too much choice out wide. Palmer's quite safe. The fixtures are good. So I've got him. Bruno Fernandes is the next price list at 9. I've wavered on him, but I've come to terms with it in the last week or so that he's a good pick. If you look at what modern FPL is in terms of Defcon and things like that, he's now probably the most versatile player in the game. He's got the most routes to points probably of anyone in the game. If he plays as an 8, he could get more Defcon contributions, quite a lot of ball recoveries for him in that position. He's still the team's most likely creative player, as much as they've got him Waymo and Cunha probably playing as 2 10s, Diallo as a wing back, etc. I still think most of the creativity comes through Bruno, which is obviously nice for him getting assists. He took penalties in pre-season when Mbeumo's been on the pitch, I think. So we still think he's the penalty taker, so roots to points there. We know historically he's been very good for BPS if he's got a contribution. So he's got goal threat mainly from penalties, but a little bit from open play. He's still got a lot of assist threat. He's still likely to be very good for BPS. He's an attacking midfielder who, one, has Defcon capabilities. That's quite rare. And two, plays 90 minutes often. That's quite rare. Most teams with their attacking players sub them off. So there's not a lot not to like about him. And again, he's at a nice price point. If you don't start with him and he does well in the first couple of weeks, he's a sort of player that might only get 1 assist and still get 8 points for that. If you see that in the first couple of weeks, you're going to want him in game week 3 for Burnley at home. That price point of 9 million in midfield is really awkward to get to if you don't have it. You're looking at probably downgrading a more expensive midfielder, unless you have Wirtz or someone you can upgrade that way. But there's not many players around these price point that are going to have ownership. Maybe Marmoush, maybe Wirtz. If he starts well, I think most people are going to want him for Burnley. He might even be a captain for Burnley in game week 3. I'd rather just start with him. I'm going to hold him for 3 weeks, play the free hit in game week 4, come to game week 5. Hopefully, I won't have used a transfer at that point. He could be moved on. Maybe he gets downgraded to a Marmoush or to a Wirtz, and I get 0.5 to upgrade Porro to a 6 million defender or something at that point. I'd use 2 transfers, but I would have rolled for a couple of weeks. So I think he's fairly steady to start the season, shall we say, Bruno Fernandes. Then I've got Ismail Assar. This was probably my trickiest position. This is the one I fluctuated on the most. Morgan Rogers is 0.5 more expensive and probably has more secure minutes. But I did a pod, the very first pod I did on this new channel, actually, at the start, looking at positions and understanding the differences between these sorts of players. Sarr, Rogers and Semenyo were the three main players that I spoke about in that pod. And the one thing I highlighted with Sarr was he's the team's biggest sort of threat running in behind. Scored in the Community Shield. He's not necessarily the main attacking threat, but to score goals, you need players stretching the defence, running in behind. Mateta comes towards the ball. Eze runs in behind a bit, but mainly comes towards the ball. So those two are going to pick the ball up, and it's Sarr that's going to be making line-breaking runs to try and get on the end of them. I'm not saying he's going to return every week, but you kind of know with him what you're getting. He's nailed in the team. He's going to be running in behind. This price point's got a lot of options. Matoma, Kudus, players like that. There's a lot of choice. I think it's a price point I want covered. And again, what do I know going into game week 1? I kind of know how Crystal Palace are going to set up. I kind of know what Sarr's role in that team is. To me, there's an element of security in that. I'm going to start with him. Rogers, is he going to start as a 10? Is he going to start off the left or off the right a little bit? Is he even going to start game week 1? He did get an ankle injury in the last friendly. From what I'm hearing, he's fine to play, but there's still some small risk that he won't. And I've got Ollie Watkins in my draft, which I'll get to in a minute. So do I want double Villa attack? It's avoidable. But I wouldn't mind having Rogers as an option here. So yeah, I think Sarr's just safe in terms of a spot in the team where likely there's going to be some transfers to be made in the sort of early game weeks. Who's the safe one for now? Where will Kudus play for Tottenham? And he's not shooting a lot for Tottenham. Got a better fixture. But again, is it a wait and see to see if he is an Mbeumo type profile on the right? Or if he's going to be more creative than that rather than goal orientated? So he hasn't been shooting a lot in pre-season, so that's not ideal. You've got Matoma, who could do very well. Maybe he'll be used narrower than in the past. But I say, Sarr, you know what you're getting. He's running in behind. His minutes are safe. So I've got him. Elliot Anderson is in at 5.5. And a bit like Tarkovsky and Milenkovic, he's there just to get me 150 points. And I think that's more nailed than a lot of the other 5.5 midfielders. Someone like a Donny O'Marlon will be appealing. Someone like a Dingra, people might want a chance. These guys could have a higher ceiling than 150 points if they got a lot of attacking returns. Equally, they could get less than 100. Is this the position in my draft where I want to take that risk in terms of slightly higher ceiling, probably a bigger risk of underachieving? Anderson's going to be fairly steady. again, I'd rather take my risks and my punts somewhere else. I'll just happily accept the 150 points from him now or something like that. The alternative really is Reinders at Man City. And for what I've seen from him, he could be massively, massively underpriced. His ability to make late runs towards the box is very reminiscent of Frank Lampard. We've seen in the past with Lampard how many goals he scored in continuous Premier League seasons. I don't doubt right now Reinders has a capability of getting 200 FPL points this year, which will be crazy at 5.5 million. We've seen Gundogan in the past for Man City make late runs into the box, play as quite an attacking 8, and go on spurts of fixtures where he gets continuous returns. Reinders could do that and do it for even longer than Gundogan. So I'm nervous about not owning him. But again, do we know he's definitely going to play all the games? Do we know how advanced he's going to play without Rodri in the team? I've got Haaland for Man City coverage, which I'll get to in a minute. Do I need to double up? In the same way I'm thinking Watkins and Rodgers, do I need to double up? I'm very open-minded that very quickly I'll want him in my team. Maybe from Elliot Anderson, maybe from Ismail Assar. So he's probably the top player on my watch list going into game week 1 who I don't have. Reinders, I'll be watching that Wolves game very closely to see how he does. And I could well be looking at this and thinking I made a big mistake here, and when he walks off with 2 or 3 attacking returns, because I think City will give him license to attack from deep. And I think City's structure this year will be a lot more deeper players making late runs to break lines, because they're so good in terms of possession. Defenders, the opposing team defending deep block, it's really hard to find space. Runs from deep from fullbacks are from central midfielders like Reinders. They're likely to be more inclined to go untracked because it's largely attacking players that are picking them up. So one of these runs from deep could end up being good for Man City in terms of return. So I think he's a sort of wait and see player, a big watch player. I wouldn't put anyone off starting with Reinders. I think he could be very good, particularly those that have got Haaland and Salah and need to save money. I think by a long way, he got the highest ceiling of the 5.5 mids. Do I want him or Anderson? Old Craig would have probably gone for Reinders here. But again, I'm trying to adapt to what the new game is. I think Anderson's 150 points. I'd quite happily just take that. You'll see here, no Liverpool is the final point to make here. I spoke about in my Liverpool analysis pod around Gakpo being an option. He's still the one I would go for. He's still, in other drafts, I still have him. I'm just kind of not really happy with the compromises in other positions by having him in. He's 7.5, so it's the SAR spot that would go to Gakpo. Where do I save $1 million from? Tarkovsky down to a 4.5 defender. I'm not sure I really like that. My strikers in a minute, there's maybe an option to save $1 million there, but I've decided I don't really like that. So ultimately, the team I actually wanted, it did have Gakpo in it, costs too much. And then you look at 3 or 4 options and think, right, one of these 3 or 4 are the most easy to sacrifice. Which one would I rather give up? And ultimately, the balance I preferred from my squad meant giving up Gakpo. I think he could do very well in game week 1. It's a bit nervy here. I don't have any Liverpool players in this draft going into game week 1 against Bournemouth. One, it's the Friday night game. So anyone that's got 3 and captain Mo Salah might be on 30, 40 points already by the end of Friday night, and I'll be on 0. But these are the decisions you make, right? Liverpool's first 3 fixtures as a group, I didn't think were strong enough. I'm going to free hit game week 4 to get them against Burnley. Game week 5, game week 6, I'll reassess. But for now, the balance of my team was impacted by Liverpool. I couldn't fit any of them in, ideally, without sacrificing someone else I wasn't really happy to. So I've gone without, but that could backfire as well. But again, you have to make bold decisions in FPL. This is the one I've decided to make, no Liverpool attack. Then, say on to the strikers. So Haaland is in as pretty much a likely captain for game week 1 and for game week 2, away to Wolves and at home to Tottenham. And as I just sort of half mentioned around Reinders, I think we will see Man City adapt a little bit more this year in terms of 2 fullbacks who basically are quite comfortable in midfield in Aït-Nouri and in Matthias Nunes. And I think there'll be a big onus on those 2 making runs between the wingers and the central players. So that little channel, half space channel, Doku, Savinho, players like that will hang wide, I think, to try and stretch the pitch widthways. There'll be a channel there between, shall we say, Doku on the left and Haaland as the 9. Can Man City get their fullbacks running into these zones? Basically puts them to the side of the penalty box, probably in the 18-yard box, but to the side of the goal. Can they get in those positions to cut the ball back to a Reinders arriving from deep, or Haaland loitering around the 6-yard box for a tap-in? I think from what I've seen, that will be Man City's main route to goals, trying to get players into those half spaces in the penalty box, left and right. Then little cutbacks, low crosses, balls across the box. Haaland should do well in those situations. I'm quite confident in most games you'll probably get 1 goal out of him. Do I think he'll justify 14 million? Probably not over a season. So I'm not viewing him as a season hold here. But I think his output is more guaranteed than Salah's at the start of the season based on how I've seen those two teams play. And for me, there's way more choice in midfield. If I don't have Salah, I'm happy to spend the money on others. Strikers, I found it a bit of a nuisance, to be fair, to settle on 3 I like. So as a collection of fixtures, I think Man City's are slightly better than Liverpool. In terms of how the teams are setting up right now, I think Haaland's output ceiling is slightly above Salah's. And in terms of squad balance, having a striker at the premium price point rather than the midfielder is more helpful. So it's not begrudgingly, I would say, I own Haaland. So I still think he won't deliver enough points to justify 14 million. But let's view him as a 6-game week pick. Let's see if he can get enough points over the 6 game weeks up till Burnley. And then we'll reassess. Maybe then he goes and I'll spend the money somewhere else. Maybe I have to downgrade him to then upgrade a midfielder to Saka from that point or something. But he's in for now. And so I think he covers quite a few captaincies for me. Watkins also in. Pretty much scored in every pre-season game for Villa this summer. Had a full pre-season, which is important, which he didn't have last year because he was away with England. Lack of competition here now. Obviously no Duran, no Rashford. So I think his minutes will be more secure. He still might get subbed off for a Marlon to play up front, or a new signing Gesand may get minutes up front. So I don't necessarily think he's a 90-minute man here, Watkins. But he clearly is the talisman in this Villa attack. I think we need to get, as a Villa fan, we need to get more players contributing goals. We haven't had enough contributions from midfield. The main man is Watkins. The team is geared towards creating chances for him. Doesn't have a lot of competition. I expect him not to repeat the season he had 2 seasons ago, where his goal contributions in general was quite crazy. What was it? Sort of up near 40 goal contributions. But I think he'll be nearer to that this year than the tally he got last year. Villa's fixtures are quite good to start with. He's an ideal price point if Gyökeres does well when I need to move sideways. I'm quite keen to own Watkins. I think he ticks a lot of safety boxes. I wouldn't even be against captaining him in game week 1 against Newcastle. He has a good record at home to Newcastle. Newcastle's defence right now, we're not quite sure what we're going to get. They haven't had the best pre-season. I think at the moment, I fancy Villa to win that game. I fancy Villa to at least contribute something, or Watkins to contribute something. So he's kind of a bit of a differential captain, but I think he's a decent own. Then the third striker I've played around with here because I've looked at drafts with Bowen. I've looked at drafts with Mateta. I've looked at drafts with cheaper options, Strand Larson, players like that, even all the way down to the 5.5s. I just think with Evan Nilsson, you kind of know what you're going to get. And again, a bit like Watkins, you got quite safe minutes up front. You might get taken off the last 15, 20 minutes. I think Kluivert's out, so he'll be on penalties. I'm not overly scared about playing him against Liverpool. We've seen what their defending was like in the Crystal Palace game. Still no Gravenberch for game week 1. I fancy Bournemouth to score at least 1 in that game, maybe 2. So even if Liverpool do win that game 4-1, if Evan Nilsson scored the Bournemouth goal, happy days. So Bournemouth's fixtures are good medium term. He's at a nice price point that if one of these 6.5s become good, I can downgrade. So, or if I need to upgrade to Mateta or something, he's there. So he covers the upgrade to Mateta plus the downgrade to Strand Larson. So I think possible pens to start with. Again, probably the team's most likely source of goals to start with, albeit, again, we don't know quite what we're getting from Bournemouth. I would have ideally liked a 6 million in this striker spot, but there's none I like. Maybe this guy at Brentford, Igor, could become good, but it's a big unknown. It's a wait and see. Maybe one of these 5.5s will turn into be quite a useful asset, even to the level of like Timu Pukki that we've had in the past that Norwich has done okay as a budget striker. There might be a promoted striker that gives that sort of level of capability and output, and I'd be happy with that. But again, too much unknown. I don't know enough about these promoted teams. I know kind of what I'm going to get from Evan Nilsson. I'll gladly accept that to start the season. So here we are with my game week 1 team selection. So it's Hermansen in goal right now, away to Sunderland. Back 3 of Porro at home to Burnley, Tarkowski away to Leeds, Milenkovic at home to Brentford. Midfield 4, Bruno Fernandes at home to Arsenal, Elliot Anderson home to Brentford, Ismaila Sarr away to Chelsea, Cole Palmer at home to Crystal Palace. And then up front, Evan Nilsson at Anfield away to Liverpool, Ollie Watkins at home to Newcastle, Erling Haaland, captain away to Wolves. On the bench is Dubravka. Dewsbury Hall, I actually didn't mention him in my midfielders. Him or Xhaka, I think is more than valid at 5 million. I think Dewsbury Hall's ceiling is probably a little bit higher. Is he on set pieces? Will he play as a number 10? Again, this is my sort of perma 8th attacker, so I should only really need him unless one of my other 7 attackers has a really bad game or is unavailable unexpectedly. So Xhaka might be a safer pick, more the Defcon mentality. Possibilities on some set pieces, maybe even penalty Xhaka. So he could end up being the best longer term pick at 5 million. I think Dewsbury Hall's fine for the short term. We'll address it again at my wild card if he's the best option. But I fancy the amount that Everton have paid on Dewsbury Hall. He'll play pretty much every game. If he's on some set pieces, all good. But I'm not really expecting to play him very much. So he's just there as the 8th attacker. So he's first on the bench away to Leeds. Elliot Anderson's there away to Brighton. And then Bijal at home to Everton, who's not available for this week. So just some final thoughts here on stuff I probably mentioned already in this pod, but just a little bit of a recap and some things. So there's a collection of set and forget players here. With the intention then of focusing my transfers on higher upside picks. So Milenkovic, Tarkowski and Elliot Anderson, those 3 are basically just there as set and forget, all 5.5 million. I'm hoping 150 points from each of them over the season. I would have spent, in that case, 16.5 million and got 450 points. I'd be happy with that, more than happy with that. That should put me well on the way to a top 50k finish if those 3 deliver sort of basically as expected. Not much growth in terms of ceiling from those players, but equally, I don't think there's much risk to underachieve on that. They've been fairly reliable for these sort of points totals. So those 3 are there. Bruno's a bit like it as well, a bit of a Defcon pick, but albeit with more attacking output. So I've gone for 3 in terms of set and forget players. I don't know if that's the right amount. Some people would be quite happy just to have 1 Defcon pick. Some might not have any. But when there's something new to the game, I think you need to embrace it and absorb it and take it for what it is. And I think these 3 players are good options for their price point. And so I can use my transfers now on this Pedro Porro spot, on the Ismaila Sarr spot, maybe on the Evan Nilsson spot, and jump around there to chase fixture upside, form, all these sorts of things that we look at as well. But I quite like the thought of having set and forget. What we've normally had in terms of set and forget in the past is like a premium defender, a Gabriel, a Trent or something like that. They're set and forget just because they play for a good team. Maybe we need to adapt our minds a little bit to what the game is this year. Thoughts? I say I'm fairly wedded now to free hit game week 4. That will get me triple Liverpool at home to Burnley, triple Crystal Palace at home to Sunderland. Other teams like Fulham at home to Leeds, Arsenal at home to Nottingham Forest, Newcastle at home to Wolves. Plenty of fixtures in that week where I don't have a lot of ownership right now. Away from game week 4, most of those teams I've just mentioned, the fixtures aren't incredible. So obviously very risky picking a team with no Liverpool in it. So it could be particularly bad on Friday night. But you take a stand with something. Liverpool are the reigning champions. There's probably a good chance they'll finish the season having scored the most goals, and I will own them at some point. But just for this first block of particularly 3 fixtures, I think I can match their points with other players and do just as well without them. I'm really just taking a risk on this Bournemouth game. Newcastle and Arsenal in game week 2 and 3. What's our expectations to Liverpool? Mine aren't crazy high. So this could backfire and I could be 7-8 million rank after game week 1. But let's see where we are after 3 game weeks to see if it works out. Next thought here is that I've got a minimal number of what I'll call risky picks. So I've tried to avoid players new to the league. We don't quite know how they're going to settle in. I've also tried to avoid players that have moved teams. Now, Hermansen is in there, but the other 2 goalkeepers at that price point have also moved to a new team. So it's the same risk for all of them. The other players are all basically in the same teams they were last year, pretty much in the same roles they were in last year. Porro's role might be slightly different under Thomas Frank. Maybe Bruno Fernandes plays a bit deeper. But on the whole, this team, I kind of know what to expect from them. I feel sort of a bit of a safety blanket in that. Players new to the league, the Reinders could do very well. The Ekatikes could do very well. The Verts could do very well. Gyökeres, there's plenty of players that you could go for. My general rule with these players is to wait and see. But I've got most of them on radar, and I've got routes to them. Elliot Anderson to Reinders, Watkins to Gyökeres, Bruno Fernandes to Verts. I've got ways to get these players if it's apparent fairly quickly I need them. But I don't really need to risk them, is my mentality. I want to try and get to kind of game week 5 having not used a transfer, ideally. And the less risky picks I have, the less likely it will be that I'll need to use a transfer. So trying to avoid early headaches here with this team. And sort of final point here is that I'm happy enough with my captaincy option. So Haaland's there for game week 1 and 2. Away to Wolves, home to Tottenham is fine. Game week 3, Bruno Fernandes is at home to Burnley. I think that's fine. Game week 4 will be a free hit. So like the Liverpool player at home to Burnley. And then we take it from there. So I don't feel like I've got a weak captain. I don't feel like I'm sort of scratching the surface in terms of a captain and taking a massive risk. Again, my thought is that Haaland returns are a bit more, not guaranteed as such, but I've got more confidence they'll happen than Salah in the first couple of weeks. So not that you can't have both, but it's a lot of money to spend on both when you can only captain one. You take a stance. Last year, I took the stance that I thought Salah was better than Haaland, and it was right. I didn't have Haaland at the start. This year, I flipped it. Well, we'll know in a couple of weeks whether that was the right thing to do. So, yeah, that's it, everyone. Hope you've sort of liked all of the pods I've done in this pre-season. The plan is to do at least one pod a week each week for the duration of the 38 game weeks. Very unlikely I'll do team reveal type ones. I might talk a little bit about my sort of plans, expectations for each game week, but it'll be more around talking points around the game week. That'll be the type of content I'll do once the season starts, rather than this is my team, these are my transfers. I'll leave that to other content creators to do that sort of content if that's your bag. One final plug for my mini league, so that's on screen right now if you want to join that. Other than that, I hope game week 1 goes well for you. Feel free to message me on Twitter and rub it in if Liverpool do very well. But other than that, I'll speak to you after the game week 1 deadline now and ahead of game week 2. Thanks all. Bye for now.